Hello, this is Sunil Sunder with njvarsity.rivals.com. I'm happy to welcome in today Mike Katz. Mike is a high school and college football coach with over 20 years of experience, an area scout for Dream Scouting Network, a youth camp owner and director of Fourth and Inches Football Camp, and a business teacher in the Union Township Public School System. Thank you so much, Coach Katz, for taking some time out to speak with me today.
I appreciate it, Sunil. Thanks for asking.
Congratulations, Coach Katz, on just absolutely, it's an amazing career. Just what you've been able to do, especially with high school and college football. I first wanted to actually ask you about the 2020 season and just get your thoughts, on high school and college football. Very different, of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, and then also being an area scout for Dream Scouting Network. How again that how affected your work and just how you were able to adjust to that.
Yeah, it's I mean, obviously a crazy, crazy year. I'm glad to see that New Jersey high school was able to get on the field for the kids even in a shortened season. And kudos to the NJSIAA and the Coaches Association for really getting that to happen. I think overall, considering the circumstances, it was a really successful year and an exciting year. And the most important thing is that those kids that put in so much time to the sport were able to get out on the field and do what they love to do,
Yeah.
especially the seniors, so they didn't lose their senior season.
Yeah.
You know, you've seen the impact it's had across the country, and then that kind of relates to how you know my new position with Dream Scouting Network has really been impacted. Obviously, the NCAA ruled that this year was not going to count against eligibility. So there's obviously a lot less spots at the college level. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids are missing out on opportunities. And it's not going to just impact this year's seniors, but it's going to be a trickle down effect where I think, and from looking at things, it's going to impact the 22 and 23 classes even more, because you're going to have the possibility of 5 and 6 classes of athletes still on rosters. And with the NCAA not expanding the number of scholarship spots, it's going to hurt a lot of kids as far as their opportunities. So, what this has been able to do for me is, once I stepped down from coaching a year and a half ago, it's kept me in it and doing what I love to do, which is help kids and try to help them get in contact with the coaches and get the exposure they need, and hopefully find them spots on rosters, whether it be at the Division I level all the way down to the Division III level. So it's been a great opportunity.
Yeah, I said for these seniors, Coach Katz, they haven't been able to visit the campuses, all virtual, of course, over Zoom, talking to, I said, head coaches, for them, it's, equally, stressful that they don't get to experience that part as well.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. My son is a freshman at Georgetown, and he's yet to step on foot on campus. He's taken his classes from my home in Cranford. He's training from home. Obviously, their season in the fall got canceled. They just opted out of a spring. They're hoping to have a spring practice schedule.
Yeah.
But I always keep remind him how lucky he was to have his senior season,
Yeah.
and what it would have been like to try to go through recruiting entering his senior year without the summer showcases and camps,
Yeah.
and the junior days and the visits to camp. It's a shame, because it's really they always tell you that when you step foot on campus whether it's the right spot for you or not.
Yeah.
And these kids aren't getting those opportunities to actually know it. So it's kind of a shot in the dark sometimes for these kids and picking their schools. For the college guys, it's kind of been a step back to like 20-30 years ago, where what recruiting was, where it really didn't take off till your senior year, and they really had to go off of your football tape. Now, what's even harder this time is, a lot of kids throughout the country don't have film for this past year. Yeah. So a lot of these coaches are going to be banking on what they see as them developing into, and you're going to see a lot of misses in good ways and bad ways. Some kids are going to get opportunities that maybe they're not going to work out at that level, and you're going to see some kids slip down to lower levels that probably could have played at higher levels because of this situation. So it's a crazy time for sure.
Yeah, they don't get that full body of work because only some schools only played what Coach Katz, only 4 games, 5 games at the most. Like you didn't have that traditional season where you have 11, 12 games. Teams that go through the state playoffs
Right.
into the sectional championships and regional championships. Of course, ending up at MetLife Stadium or down there at Rutgers Stadium with SHI Stadium.
Absolutely. And the other side of it is, maybe even more importantly, is those kids didn't get the opportunity throughout the spring and summer season to really hit the weight room with their team and develop their bodies and take that next step from their junior year to their senior year of progress. Yeah. These kids were, put into situations where they were lifting on their own at their own, house with whatever weights they had. It really it impacted a lot. I mean, you saw it in the professional levels and the college levels with injuries, and you saw a lot of surprises. All the way down with maybe some outcomes of games that wouldn't normally have happened, but because of maybe a team missing practice for 2 weeks and coming back with 1 or 2 practices to get ready for a game, you saw a lot of upsets.
Yeah. What I enjoyed, Coach Katz, was that the fact, being up here in North Jersey, we got to see schools like from South and Central Jersey come up to North. I think that was a really great thing to do. It said with games, of course, getting, canceled. I just wanted to get it, just the talent level is just outstanding, again, from across the state of New Jersey.
I'll tell you what, the coaches in the state do such a great job of promoting the high school football, but also developing their athletes. And, year in, year out, you see a ton of kids go on to the next level and be very, very successful. You see New Jersey kids go into the draft and be drafted throughout the NFL draft. And that's great. And what was nice about this year is you saw games getting canceled and athletic directors not worrying about the distance or the league that they're involved in, but trying to find games. And what it did was, it amounted to some exciting matchups that you don't normally see. South Jersey teams versus North Jersey, some parochials against some public schools. It's kind of funny. There was the fight for the long time to separate and put the parochials in their own league, which probably was for the best. But now you got to see some of those nice public school parochial matchups of heavyweights that you wouldn't see. And now people are saying they want to see it more. So, it's one of those things that what was old is new and what was new is old.
Yeah. I got to see Williamboro and Ramapo, and that was one of the best games I think I saw all year long. That went right down to the wire, fourth quarter, and just see the level of competition, the way, guys were just laying it out all on the field, and it was just great. And then tremendous coaching on both sides of the ball, and just a lot of fun, again, to be a part of that experience. I wanted to ask you just one more question about Dream Scouting Network, and just if you can talk about just the success with, that Coach Katz.
So a good friend of mine, Jerry Flora, who I worked with at William Patterson. He was the head coach for a long time. We were assistants together when Mike Miello was there. When he left William Patterson, he was looking for his next step in his career, and he got involved with the Dream Scouting Network. He reached out to me over the summer asking me if I was going back to coach this year. And, he said to me, he goes, "Mike, you'd be great at this. This is one of your strengths. You were a great recruiter. You were great placing your kids at college. This would be a great spot for you." So, it was funny because it was one of those things where, as a high school coach, I didn't necessarily think that the companies like this were necessary, because I knew what I did to help get my kids to the next level and get them that exposure that they needed. But as I looked into it more and more, especially with the pandemic, I realized how many kids were missing out on that exposure for various reasons. Maybe they're a late bloomer and they didn't develop until late. maybe they don't go to a high profile program. So they're from a smaller school that, recruiters don't normally step into their schools to visit. Obviously in our state, the recruiters clamor to the big parochials and those big public schools. But, small schools don't always produce the number of athletes that those schools do. So they oftentimes get overlooked. Maybe a kid moved from another town and is in a new school or another state. Maybe a new coach took over that is really inexperienced, doesn't have the context. So, as I looked into it, I realized, what, this isn't a company that's because of a knock on what coaches do, but it's another way in which kids get what they need and can help the process for them. Mm-hmm. So I joined probably right at the end of November, beginning of December. Okay. Currently, I have 9 clients that I'm working with, 8 of which are from New Jersey. Okay. I've got 4 seniors, I've got 4 juniors, and I've got 1 sophomore. Mm-hmm. And basically what I do is, I take what they've done, their film, their academic backgrounds, and, I do what a head coach does. I reach out to the schools on their behalf to try and, make them aware of the athlete and their credentials as far as on the field and ends in the classroom, and try to help them get the exposure they need. And, it's off to a great start. The kids are excited about it because obviously it's another way for them to get looks. The 4 seniors that I'm working with in the short time, even though there's so few of spots left at this point and that late in the game, all of them have been offered spots, whether it be a roster spot. One is at several Division III schools. The other 3 have all been offered scholarships at Division II schools. So we've managed to find them homes that, by the next signing period, they'll probably be signing to. And there's a couple more opportunities in the works. So they're getting the opportunities they were looking for. And you know what, that's what you get into this for as a coach, or what I'm doing now is to help kids get to that next level. What I always tell them is, at some point, football is going to end for them. I was lucky enough to coach some great kids. But even if you play at the very highest level and you make it to the NFL, that's going to end someday. You need something to fall back on. And you want to leverage your academic prowess to get you to a level where you can really get the best education while also enjoying the highest level of athletic competition you can get to set you up for the next 40 years of your life. And, it's fun watching these kids, when you say, hey, such and such a school really likes your film, and they're going to be reaching out to you, offer you, to see the smiles and the reliefs on both their parents and on their faces. It makes it all worthwhile.
As we know how costly college, can be these days. It's not like 20, 30 years ago, as that how affordable it is now. It's just, it's just insane how much,
it's unbelievable. It really is, it, even for me as a coach, it was an eye opener. As I said, my son Connor, he was getting recruited, and, as we visited these schools and you go to some of these high academic institutions in the Patriot League and Ivy League, and you're being hit with numbers like $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. As a teacher who's married to a teacher, even with 2 incomes like that, it's astronomical to think the amount of debt that these kids are going to come out of college with. So yeah, every little bit helps. So, I know I was thankful the academic money and athletic money that my son was able to get, and so I can't imagine anyone being able to afford college in full. Like, to make that kind of money, it's a dream of mine. But it's good that we can help kids like that and make it more affordable.
Yeah, I think people don't realize how imperative student athlete is. It's that student part, is that where, kids have to really focus in. I've talked to a number of players, I'm sure, of course, you have as well. And that really has to, you have to be able to balance that out, that time management, being organized. And another on top of that is that for these kids, which is I think is incredible is that the fact that they're able to use Huddle and some of these other applications as far as like, showcasing their talents and their highlights, that's another, that plays a pivotal role as well, Coach Katz.
These, this day and age, it's easier in some ways to be able to get that information out to the coaches. When I played, and I'm gonna age myself here, it was a matter of making a copy off the VCR of your videotape and sending out the tape, through the snail mail to a college coach and waiting for response back. There were no cell phones, there was no social media. Nowadays, if kids do it right, there's so many ways, through social media, the coaches are on there constantly. Obviously through Huddle, the coaches are always on Huddle. But what you said is true. There's more to it than just being the athlete. You have to be a student athlete. And I always tell, kids I work with and my former players, it says student athlete and it's student first, because so often, yes, as long as you're NCAA eligible, can a lot of schools get you into the school, but at the lower levels, the FCS on down, they don't have the leeways that the FBS schools do. So when you're looking at the Ivy Leagues and the Patriots, you have to be a really good student. And, your grades are going to open up so many more doors for you. What you look at on social media and what you're posting can have such an impact, because, when college coaches come in, they're looking at three things. They're looking at your athletic ability, they're looking at your grades and your academic background, and they're looking at your character. If you can show them that you've got tremendous character and you're not posting inappropriate things on social media and liking things that you shouldn't. If your academic profile is strong, it makes their job so much easier, and makes a coach's or a recruiter's job easier to get you those opportunities, because now the only thing the college coach has to do is look at it and say, okay, can he or can he not play at this level? Because the other parts of it are checked off already because of what you've done. And that's really important because, we talked about the cost, $70,000 a year. Well, you know what? That means when, you're an investment to these coaches, and if they're going to make $250,000 investment in you, they're expecting you to be there for 4 years. And you know what? Their job security is also on the line, because when they make mistakes with recruits, it could eventually cost them their job because they're not performing as well. So, they want to make sure that they get the right kids into their programs that they know are going to be there and be able to develop. So the academic part and the character part is so vital to them.
Yeah, no, I agreed. I wanted to pivot, Coach Katz, to, of course, your 4th and Inches football camp. You've been running that since, I believe, 2004. Can you, going on your 17th year, just how, much that, success and how that's brought, a lot of joy to you.
So, yeah, I started it. It's basically what I do in the summers. And I started it way back when I became the head coach at Arthur L. Johnson down in Clark. Okay. And honestly, I did it as a way to have a camp for youth kids within the community, be able to come, learn some football, and as a way for me as a public school coach to get these kids involved with my program and help keep them away from parochials. Because, as a coach, you want to recruit your own. And this was my way of showing them their love and teaching them about our program and getting them involved very quickly so they want to grow up and play for us. When I left ALJ, I stopped it for 1 year and when I was at William Patterson University. And my son was about 6, 7 at the time. And he's like, Dad, I want to go to football camp. And I was like, Connor, I was like, there's no football camps for kids your age. Because at that time I was just doing it for the high school age and the middle school coming in. Yeah. And he was like, well, come on, I really want to do it. So I was like, you know what, maybe I'll do it again. So here I am thinking, all right, I'll restart my camp. It'll be more of like a play date for him and a couple of his friends. I'll buy him a couple t-shirts and they'll have a ball. Well, the next thing I knew, I had 35 kids signed up, and it took off. Within the second year, I had 2 weeks of almost 200 kids. I've been now doing it for 17 years. I do it 2 weeks a year, usually at the end of June and July. I have it for kids aged pre-K all the way up through entering eighth grade, and it's just been a joy. I get a lot of my friends who are local high school coaches come and help me out. Former players who have played for me at various places that I've coached, they come and they work. And we're teaching the kids the basics. It's not padded. It's the fundamentals. The proper way to catch a ball, the proper way to carry a football, proper way to block. All those things that you need, no matter what level you're playing on. And obviously we make it fun. We play games, and I'll tell you what, it's been awesome. Working with little kids, it's just tremendous. Last year, for the first time ever, we had our first little girl join, a kindergartner, and she was a riot. And it really is such an enjoyable time, and I love it. And I'll tell you, what's funny about it is the kids, that my former players that I get to work it, so many times I've heard from them at the end of the week, Coach, this is a lot harder than I thought it was. And they have a new appreciation for you as a coach, and they get so much out of it. Like they get into it. When they're playing the competitive games, you see my coaches jumping around, cheering and screaming, and it's just great for everybody. So many lessons are learned, so many great times. So I just love doing it. It's been an awesome experience.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, it's good to see. That's why I always ask the players. You see Pee Wee junior football, and then of course the camps, to see them rise up every year, and then eventually end up on freshman, JV, and then eventually varsity. It's great to see that blueprint working so well. I wanted to ask you, Coach. You said that you've had so much experience when it comes to the high school and college game. I had to ask you, your first job, in high school football. Just what was that experience, for you? And then of course, you played as well in high school. I believe at Union. Can you just talk about that?
Sure. Well, first off, I grew up in Union,
Okay.
where I teach now.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was really lucky. I grew up at a time where Union High School was the premier program in the state of New Jersey, bar none. It was led by Lou Rotino,
Yep.
who many people, consider to be one of, if not the best high school coaches that we've seen in New Jersey.
Yep.
I know the Giants sponsor a Coach of the Year award that's named after him, that Coach Wimberly from Hackensack just recently won this year. It was a great time to play football. And I was lucky in that regard. I was around in a great community that really supported it. When you talk about Friday night lights, my senior year, we actually put up lights. So my senior year was the first year that we had lights in Union. That was a time period where, Elizabeth was our arch rival, and you would play Elizabeth on a Friday night and get 10,000 people, and people would be stacked around the stadium. And it was just such an unbelievable atmosphere. And it was, when you were growing up, you talk about like kids leaving their schools. Well, I grew up in a town where all I wanted to do was play for Union High School. Like, it wasn't about playing for the Giants or Jets. I wanted to be a farmer. And obviously the success has a lot to do with it, but it was also the coaches. Lou Rotino was our head coach. Fred Stengel, who obviously went on to coach at Bergen Catholic as head coach, was my offensive line coach. So we had great coaches. And that just built such a strong foundation for me. The love of the game, the right way to do things, the way to handle yourself. I was going to say, winning or losing. We didn't have a lot of losses. My 4 years in the high school, we were 42-2. We finished number one in the state of New Jersey 3 times. But you learned how to handle yourself and carry yourself, and how important it was to have the name Union on your jacket, and understanding that when you're walking through the center of town, you were representing that program. And it's lessons like that that I've carried through into my coaching career, because Coach Rotino, Coach Stengel, and the others like really emphasize those. My first high school job was as a freshman coach. I was a freshman coach at Whippany High School. I was in my last year of college. My eligibility was done. And I was hired as a freshman coach at Whippany Park, where they ran the wing T. And one of the reasons I got the job is because I had played at Union and we ran the wing T.
Okay.
It was, it was a great experience. It was a learning one. I was, a 22-year-old naive coach that thought I could do everything and knew everything. And you really learn so much. I called the defense. We had two coaches running the entire show. The other assistant was the offensive coach. I was the defensive coach. I handled the offensive and defensive line and linebackers. The great thing about it was, because there was only two of us, you had to do everything. At the high school level, you get away from that, and at the college level even more so, where maybe you're coaching one position or maybe one position on either side. Well, here we are, two of us coaching all positions and making all the adjustments and getting ready. And we did the grunt work, if you will. As freshman coaches for varsity games, we were the guys going to the varsity games of the next opponent and doing the scouting and doing it the old-fashioned way, like writing it down on note cards and drawing up the plays they drew and all that. But I think there's something to be said about it, because it really gave me a real good feel of what another team was doing. I found throughout my career, even though now we have Huddle and all this software that can break down tendencies, I'll still draw them up, freehand a lot, because it gives me a better feel for how they're trying to attack you or how can we attack them and what they're trying to do. So it was a great experience. Looking back, it's amazing how much things have changed in just that amount of time. Because when I started, there was no Huddle. When you were exchanging film with coaches, you were, meeting them somewhere on the parkway or, at some rest stop to exchange videotapes, and, now it's a click of the button. So it's so different. Things have changed in some ways for the good, and other ways you sometimes say, oh, I wish I could go back to that, but learned a lot from it, to say the least.
Yeah. No, you just had such an impressive, as far as your experience being so extensive, both as we talked about public, parochial, and then also teaching during that span as well. I mean, just being able to balance that out and just from, job to job, how, you were able to tackle that. I mean, it's truly incredible what you were able to do and accomplish, Coach Katz.
I appreciate that. It takes a lot of organization, without a doubt. It takes, obviously I'm married and I have three boys of my own. It takes a really supportive family, especially a really supportive wife, because for all the wives of coaches out there, there are special people to put up with, all the time away from the family. Coaching football, maybe more than any other sport, is a year-round situation. You go from the summer conditioning and practices right into the season, which is long hours. And then even when the season's quote unquote over, you have your weight room and summer conditioning. You have talking to college recruiters and making sure that your kids are staying right in the classroom. So often the coach is the one that other teachers will go to in the school to say, hey, Johnny's not doing as well in class as he should, or could you talk to Johnny because maybe he didn't act the right way. There's the fundraising component of it, which, most schools have to do now because unfortunately budgets can't cover everything that a program needs. So, it's a big task, no doubt, and so many coaches do such a wonderful job at it. And again, most of them, because they have really supportive families, that I think the big part is you get your family involved with the program. My kids were always around the schools where I coached and were on the sidelines when they could be. And I think that's what led them to love football so much. I never said, hey, you have to play football. They gravitated towards it because they were around it their whole lives. And, luckily I have a wife that, likes sports, and maybe because she had no choice, having four men in the family. But she's been great. So yeah, it's been a fun time to say the least.
What I was thinking about this before I, started the interview, is that how you've been able to immerse yourself in all aspects of football, as far as when it comes to coaching, that, and you really are a novice at it, that you really, said, enjoyed that part, as far as the schemes, and just, I'm really impressed by that, Coach Katz.
Yeah, football is, there's so much to football, and I love, obviously, the competitiveness of it. I love the chess game of, trying to out scheme your opponent and understand what they're going to do, and what, if you make an adjustment, what their next step is, and trying to stay one step ahead of the competition. Um, I think what I love most about it is kind of what you touched on, is watching the development of the youth, and making an impact on them and helping them. Like I said, I've been lucky in that, when I was with St. Peter's, one of our athletes, has made it all the way to the NFL, Minka Fitzpatrick.
Yep.
And clearly one of the most God-given athletes I've ever been around in my life.
Mhm.
But what really impressed upon me is his work ethic, and he was a kid that was so self-driven. But as proud of him as I am, seeing other players of mine go on to become doctors, lawyers, teachers, that just has as much enjoyment in seeing as him getting to the NFL, because, that's not always going to happen. But seeing, the impact that the sport has had on them, or, something that maybe you said, I can tell you so many stories of players, reaching out to me and thanking me for something maybe I said to them, or, or me reaching out to a player because, maybe they called me out on something I said at one time. And, maybe I wasn't, real at the time, realizing that, what, that's not the way to say it or the way to go about it. So, in this profession, you're always learning. And that's what's really fun about it. Like I said, it's always changing. It's always a challenge, for the coaches that coached this past year. Like this year was a challenge like no other. And I'm envious of how they all were able to do it. And so I'm amazed at what a wonderful job they did. I had the luxury of sitting back and watching from my couch and not taking part this year, but seeing all the great things that these coaches did is amazing. And there's so many great coaches out there.
Hey, the fact that you're a part of state championship teams at St. Joe's and St. Peter's Prep, I'm sure that was really extra special for you, Coach Katz.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, it is. Make no mistake about it. I mean, being a coach, and as a coach, you always have an ego, and you always want to be the best. And I guess in our profession, wins and losses is what's looked at so often. So of course, you always want to get to the top of that mountain. And I've been lucky. I coached at St. Joe's. I coached at Arthur L. Johnson. I coached at St. Peter's, where we won state championships. I was involved at Bergen Catholic and St. Peter's, where we lost in the state finals. But to say that that's the most enjoyable, I don't know if it is. At the moment, it is. But when you look back, sometimes some of your best coaching comes in seasons where you didn't necessarily reach that mountaintop. I've been involved with teams that, were under 500. And looking back, I might have done some of my best coaching at those, because to me, you can't always mark success based off the wins and losses. If I've always thought that if you look at a team preseason and go, okay, you know what, this team's about a 7-win team. Well, then the job is to get them to 8 or 9, not to 7. You want to get beyond what the expectation is. But you also don't want to only get to 3 or 4, because then you've underachieved. So, my job and any coach's job is to get your kids to take that next step and go beyond what they even thought was possible. And if you can do that and the kids can have an enjoyable experience doing it, the state championships are awesome. And let me tell you, the last time I was involved in one with St. Peter's when we were in Giants, MetLife.
Yeah.
Something, I'll always remember.
Yeah.
But I'll also remember, when I was the head coach at Watchung Hills and we won our last game of the season to finish 4-6, the hugs and the looks on the faces of the kids, because we had just changed the program from a team that had no more than 1 or 2 wins for the prior 3 or 4 seasons. And in one season got them to the verge of the playoffs and breaking school records for offense and things. And them realizing that they got out of their senior season what they were hoping. To quote one of my former players, Nick Frank, he came up to me after the game and said, "Coach, thank you for giving me what I always wanted. I'm finally part of a football program."
Oh, wow.
And that, that has always stuck with me, because we were 4-6, and a lot of people from the outside looking in are like, mediocre season. It was so much more to that, to those players and to my staff. So, it's not always about the state championships.
Yeah, no, you make an excellent point. You talked about earlier about representing the program, and it said, when you're walking around town, even years after you graduate, that people still remember. It said you were again a part of that high school program. That well said about that. I don't want to forget, Coach Katz, you attended and graduated from Montclair State. I graduated from Rambo College, New Jersey Athletic Conference, Division III, and the fact that you had, I think, twice, said coached at William Patterson University. I had to ask you, just about that experience, coaching there, for the Pioneers.
I was an assistant. I wasn't a head coach.
Okay, assistant coach. I'm sorry.
Loved it. My first go round, Mike Mielo, the longtime head coach and athletic director at Ramapo, he had just left Rutgers. He had went down there. He had retired from the public school to go with Greg Schiano to Rutgers, his first go rounds. And he and I had known each other for quite a bit of time through my time at St. Joe's, because Tony Karsich and him were close friends, and we got to know each other through scrimmaging and things. And he took over up there, and he asked me to come on as his special teams coordinator and linebackers coach. And, at the time I was like, absolutely. All I wanted to do, was coach college football. I wanted to coach at the highest level I possibly could. And I thought this was a great opportunity, being around, someone who I consider a legend in Mike Mielo. And we had a tremendous staff. Ed Stinson, who is a legend in himself, the longtime coach at Hoboken. He retired. He became our defense coordinator, and I was, pretty much Ed's right-hand man, in that I was responsible for the breakdowns and the tendencies and things. And we went in there, and again, it was a situation where, without being rude or disrespectful, we were the worst team in the league. And the NJAC's not an easy place to play. Montclair State with great, teams. And at the time, Rowan was one of the best teams in the country and had a team go to the Stag Bowl. We went in there, and in our first year, we upset 2 top 20 teams. We upset the first game of the year, Wilkes. In our second to last game of the year, we took on Rowan, who was ranked number 2 in the nation. And, this might be one of my greatest memories, is that game. We went in there, and I'll never forget walking the field pregame, and they've got a bunch of wide receivers that are 6'4" and 6'5", and they're catching the ball and they're dunking it on the goalpost. And I look over, and our corners are about 5'8" and 5'9". And Mike Mielo looked at me and goes, "How are we going to do this?" I was like, "I don't know, coach." And we went out, and our kids found a way. And we ended up, we returned a punt to set up a field goal. We returned a fumble for a touchdown. We all kinds of crazy things happened in the game, and we were up by, I believe it was 2 points, 1 point, with 30 seconds left in the game. We had the ball. We couldn't run out the clock, and we were punting off about our own 20-yard line. And I was responsible for special teams, and my personal protector on the punt unit was out because he had gotten hurt. Our backup was in. Mm-hmm. And we go out of a spread look, and they were bringing everybody because they knew that they needed to get the block, or else pretty much the game was over. And I remember being on the headsets, and my personal protector, the replacement, couldn't remember the call to bring in the flyers into the protection. Mm-hmm. And I'm yelling to him, and he couldn't hear me. And so I started saying on the phones, Mike, we got to call timeout. Coach Miller, we got to call timeout. I was like, no, I want the clock to run. I'm like, Coach, you got to call timeout. Well, we don't call timeout, and sure enough, the punt gets blocked. Mm. They recover at about our 3-yard line, and there's literally time for one play. They run their special teams unit out. We call timeout to ice the kicker, mm-hmm. And Coach Miele looks at me and goes, "All right, you better call up a good field goal block here," because their field goal kicker was an all-conference kid. Mm-hmm. And we called our field goal block that we practiced every day, and 2 of our kids did a great job, and our All-American outside linebacker broke through and blocked the kick, and we recovered and fell on it to end the game. It was the first time I've ever been involved in a game where it ended on back-to-back blocks. Yeah. And we upset the number 2 team in the nation. And we really, that kind of was like the culmination, not only that season where we went 5-5, but kind of really drove us to the changes that we made in that program. And we had a lot of success. And, at the end of 3 years, Coach Miele stepped down, and that's when I left as well. And I became a D coordinator at Bergen Catholic. And then mm-hmm. several years later, one of the assistants on the staff, Jerry Flora, had been the head coach after Mike, and he had asked me to come back. So I went back, and I was a special teams coordinator. I was there for Coach Flora's last year with the program. And then Dustin Johnson, who's the head coach presently, mm-hmm. he took over. He asked me to remain. And I stayed on as his special teams coordinator and running back coach before I decided to step down, really to devote more time to my senior son's season. Mm-hmm. I loved it. I loved coaching in that league. People, I don't think people understand how great a football, Division III football really is. Yeah. And the NJAC is great Division III football. There's so many good teams, so many good athletes. So far too often people think, it's Division I or bust. Not everybody can play Division III football. It takes special athletes, and in some ways, even more special, because those kids are doing it without scholarships. They're it's really the essence of what college football is about, because they're doing it for the love of the game, because they love to play it. And we had some great kids. We didn't always have the success we wanted, but great memories, great kids. I loved every minute of it, working with the staffs and the kids up there. It was definitely fun years.
Yeah, saying there were a couple of names just looking in your bio. I think Shadi Davis and Kareem Moon, said I'm 2 players that definitely were able to flourish in the program. Coach Katz.
Oh yeah, Shadi. Well, Kareem was there. Coach Flora was a holdover from the staff mm-hmm. before Coach Miele came over, and I believe he had recruited Kareem out of a school in Staten Island, if I'm not mistaken. Great athlete. He became he led the nation in kick return yardage his senior year, all levels. Yeah. He averaged some crazy number, like 28 or 29 yards a return. To the point we had to do all kinds of crazy schemes, because people literally would start off games by onside kicking just so they wouldn't kick to him. So, we did some things where we moved him around. Just an explosive kid, both in the punt return game and the kick return game. And then Shadi Davis, he actually went to West Virginia University. When we took over, He transferred in, played outside linebacker, and I was responsible for linebackers. And he was kind of a hybrid. He was a kid that when we would go to our Okie scheme, we would line up as a D end because he was a great pass rusher. And then in our regular 4-3 look, he would play outside linebacker for him. Sometimes we drop him. Sometimes, we play him normal and rush him. Shadi is the young man that blocked the kick that I was talking about, and he ended up being an All-American that year. What funny about Shadi is he would drive you crazy. An unbelievable athlete, but he would have a knack of finding a way to line up in the wrong places. And he'd be a guy that, I know Coach Stinson would pull his hair out, screaming at him, screaming at me, Mike, you got to get him lined up. Yeah. And in the rowing game, as an example, but, Shadi just had one of those things that, like, he always was in the right place at the right time. There's a particular play in the rowing game where he lined up on the wrong side. He would flip-flop. He was our strong side guy, and he ended up being on the weak side. He just lined up wrong. Well, he lined up wrong, but he lined up right, because on that play, he ended up picking off the ball in the flat, and it wouldn't have happened if he didn't line up wrong. So he was just one of those guys that success found a way to him. And, it brings back great memories when you talk about guys like that.
That's great. All right, Coach Katz, have I left anything out? The floor is yours. I hope I've asked all the questions. I said I was going to end, usually I end with family, and I know you've taught them about, them quite a bit. I'm sure this is really special because, being able to share these, moments, I said with your, your 3 sons, your wife. I wanted to ask you just, anything you had to add about that, because I think that's really great to see, and I'm sure, especially with Connor and I don't want to forget your 2 other boys as well, but if you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, it's family's everything. Like I said earlier, my wife, my 3 boys, Connor, Ryan, and Jake. Mm-hmm. They're my everything. In my professional life, football has made me who I am. Yeah. But in my overall life, it's my family that makes me who I am. And that's that was one of the reasons why I stepped away from coaching when I did, because Connor was being recruited, and I wanted to see him through the process. I wanted to really concentrate on his senior season of football rather than running from coaching at William Patterson to try to get to his games on a Friday night on time. And then my middle son, he was playing football, and I wanted to be able to get to see his JV games and things of that nature. So to me, I spent so much time in my life coaching other people's sons that I wouldn't have found it comfortable missing my own. And football will always be there for me. I'm going to go back, I know, at some point, because I'm a coach. I love it, and I miss it without a doubt. But at the same time, like, there's nothing like sitting in the stands and cheering your own sons on, and coming home from a game and being able to talk about it. And this year, like I mentioned, my son's home away from football, and being able to almost sit with him and talk about it, because just the other day he was saying, like, boy, Dad, I miss football so much. I got to get back on campus. And to be able to talk him through it and keep him positive in these situations, and make him realize how lucky he is to have the opportunity he has. And things will go back to normal. I'm confident in that. Now that the vaccine's out, hopefully it gets moving a little faster. I've been lucky in so many ways, and none luckier than what I have with my family, without a doubt. So there's nothing better than family. There's nothing more I could say about that.
Sounds good. We're going to end on that note. Coach Katz, it's been an absolute honor and privilege interviewing you. Thank you for the opportunity, and wishing you continued success again. I said with the Dream Scouting Network, with your football camp, Fourth and Inches, and as a teacher. Just really, I said the work you do is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Sunil, I really appreciate all the kind words, and thank you for having me, and thank you for what you do to promote the athletics too in the sport. We need, for so many years, so many outlets did such a great job, and through cuts and things, it seems like less exposure is out there from the media for the high school athletics, and it's such an important area for kids. And what you do a fantastic job, but what you're doing for the youth of around North Jersey and all of New Jersey, covering it and interviewing these kids, it does not go unnoticed. You do a fantastic job, so please keep it up, because we need more of that.